All right, we are now recording and we're going to start off with the land acknowledgement. Sure.
Hi, everyone. Land acknowledgements are supposed to be one small part of a larger commitment to solidarity with Indigenous peoples. We are joining today from many places. Some of us are here in Takaranto, which is the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, Anishinaabe, Chippewa, Haudenosaunee, and Wendat peoples, and is covered by Treaty 13. Some are from Windsor or Leamington, the territory of the Three Fires Confederacy. Living and working on these territories means it is extremely important for us to stand in solidarity with Indigenous peoples of these lands, as we are fighting for safety, dignity, and fairness for farm workers, community members, unionists, and activists. All of our struggles are intertwined as we resist the colonial capitalist states that are oppressing all marginalized communities. And in addition to a land acknowledgement, we also do a moment of silence where we take a moment to remember and honor all of the migrant farm workers who have been injured and killed over the decades that they have been working here to support their families, communities, and putting food on Canadian tables. So we can take a moment.
We also take time to remember and acknowledge that people are being murdered and killed in detention sites, both in Canada and the United States, and people are dying through the process of migration. So we take time to remember and honor all of our comrades. On a lighter note, Alicia, you're still here? And I did promise to make you feel embarrassed. It's Alicia's birthday, so just wanted to sing happy birthday to Alicia. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Oh no.
Happy birthday, Alicia.
Thank you so much. Oh my God. Chris, you did that. Thank you guys so much.
Cool. All right. So we have some important updates that we want to start off with. We've got two particularly important things that have happened in the last 72 hours. Do you want to start off with Meredith or Tanita? Do you want to start off with Bukhari? I guess.
Hi again. I'm sorry if I ignore the class and I'm adjusting everyone online. Maybe I'll move. So a group of us took part in legal action. And when I say a group of us, I mean Justice for Migrant Workers, the Migrant Farm Worker Clinic, and the Industrial Accident Victims Group of Ontario, IAVGO. Meredith Yaknin, who's online, and myself represented this group at a hearing that was based on a human rights tribunal decision. So in this case, a gentleman was injured on the job and was terminated shortly afterwards. His employer refused to accommodate his disability. The tribunal, he made a claim at the tribunal, the Human Rights Tribunal, and the tribunal dismissed his claim without even looking at it because they decided that he wasn't really disabled. They said that he had a transitory disability. So he brought his case to the Divisional Court, which is a court in Ontario. And the court released a decision last week where they said that the tribunal acted improperly and illegally when it dismissed his claim. And it did so based on a definition of disability that it shouldn't have. It basically made up its own version of what disability is, which it should not have. And so it has been sent back to the Human Rights Tribunal to be re-adjudicated, unfortunately, from the beginning, but with a new decision maker. So that was a successful victory for Mr. Bokhari, but also for disability rights in general, at least in the legal context, and for injured workers. And Meredith, if you'd like to add anything else.
That was a good summary, Tinita. So just to add to what Tinita explained about the decision, it is a really pretty significant decision because the Human Rights Tribunal of Ontario, as people may have seen in the news over the years, has in the past few years just been dismissing cases left, right, and center without ever giving them a real hearing. So finding all kinds of procedural and technical ways to dismiss human rights claims without allowing people to actually show the discrimination they suffered. And this was what happened to Mr. Bokhari. And the court very clearly said that that was illegal and inappropriate on the law. And the tribunal was not entitled to fail to, like, the tribunal had to give Mr. Bokhari a chance to actually argue the actual discrimination and was totally wrong to come up with like a technical way to get rid of his case. So a pretty significant decision. And I think the contributions of interveners, like the intervention of migrant workers, was clearly significant to the court.
Cool. So great work to everybody. The second thing I guess I'll briefly talk about is, as some of you know, we've been in a 25-year battle against the government of Canada around unemployment insurance benefits. So migrant farm workers have been paying into decades, billions of dollars into our EI system. So in January of this year, there was a class action lawsuit, which was commenced. Well, the hearing part was commenced. It started a couple of years ago, saying that Canada unjustly enriched itself of over $500 million. And this was a hearing to determine whether the certification process, meaning which will the case go forward or not. And yesterday at about 4:30 p.m., we got word that the case is going forward and hundreds of millions of dollars we're going to continue to fight for should be returned back to the rightful owners, which are workers. So the real part of the story starts now. And for all the farm workers online, the real battle begins now. We've got to start organizing to get our damn money back for y'all. All right. So this is extremely significant. And this is kind of a first. So the hearing is going to probably be within the next little while. So we just get ready. Great. Okay. So let us begin with today's topic. Who should we start off with? So what we want to do today is talk more or less about the history of migrant farm workers in healthcare and looking at the way that these issues have played out since many of us have started organizing, since way back when. So traditionally, we all know that soft workers, seasonal agricultural workers are tied to an employer. When they get hurt or sick, they're basically sent back home. And because of the tremendous power imbalance of being tied to an employer, the social isolation, the racism inheritance programs in our healthcare system, and the fact that we are simply downloading our healthcare responsibilities has created multiple obstacles and barriers for this particular group of workers to have access for healthcare. This both in the area of healthcare, but also in when workers become injured and sick. And we're going to have an amazing panel speak today from multiple angles to address these particular issues. So I guess I'll say who the five panelists are right now. Alicia Carty, who is an organizer with Injured Workers Action for Justice and Justice for Migrant Workers, and today's VIP birthday person. Meredith Yachnin, who is a staff lawyer at the Industrial Accident Victims Group of Ontario, who was involved in another really important case around access to healthcare for injured migrant workers. Tanya Correra, who is a friend. Are you my friend? Sometimes? Okay. Oh, who also explained to me, did you all know the difference between Lady Grey Earl Grey tea and regular Earl Grey tea? Does anybody know about this? Okay. So part of today's presentation will be about this, but one of the key people for us in our community who really to help to nuance and the understanding about racism and access to healthcare from a frontline perspective has been Tanya, and Tanya's work has been instrumental for our work. Dr. Vasanthi Venkatesh, who is my colleague at the University of Windsor and wrote a impeccably important paper about the Toussaint case. 1, 2, 3. And last but not least is one of my favorite students, and somebody who is I can't basically not work. I can't survive actually at this point with working and trying to do issues around migrant workers, is our staff lawyer, Tanita Doma. Tanita is subjected to my jokes at all hours of day or night. She likes my jokes, no? No, okay. But we are lucky to have somebody, and we've got a lot of other my former law students who are here too, who have been foundational, amazing people to keep this clinic working. So we've got an awesome panel, and maybe we'll start off with Alicia, if that's okay. And I want to push us for a second before I begin, right? So there's a particular way of understanding. So when we think about lived experience, there's a caution for all of us online and people who are in the room about how we got to be careful about tokenizing, right? About when we hear the stories of lived experiences. What I would encourage everybody to do is hear the nuances that emerge from understanding access to our healthcare system. And today, Alicia, for the last couple of years, organizing with Alicia has been important to understand what the nuances of what when we talk about status upon arrival or what universal healthcare means. And there's something particular when injured worker speaks about this. The same discourse I heard from another injured worker who's back home in Trinidad. His name is Caban. Another injured worker, Dwayne Henry. All these comrades, Dwayne, Mr. Justice, I should say, sorry. When people like this speak about these issues, right, there's a particular understanding of what status upon arrival means with the intersection of healthcare that most of us don't grasp, right? We think of it as a catchphrase, but it's something much more meaningful when people who are actually going through this, right, which helps our understanding for organizing and policy. So, Alicia, the floor is yours. You've got about 10 minutes, if not more. So please begin.
Hi, everyone. Good evening, good evening, good evening. Thank you so much, Chris, for embarrassing me like that. Wow, you just know how to do it, right? Thank you, everyone, for being here. My name is Alicia, former migrant worker. I have been coming to Canada for many years, working. First, I would like to say before coming to Canada as a migrant worker, you have to do a full medical, ensuring that you're fit and ready to work. If you have a headache, you have to restart that process and you have to pay for everything that you do before coming here. So when coming here, and getting injured, I believe that, you know, no one should be denied overall, in getting healthcare. But the fact that we have to do a full medical to come in the country, then I don't believe that any of us should be sent home like not what normally happens, um, without getting the healthcare that we need. In 2020, I was sent to do a job that I was not trained for. I fell from over 9 feet. I have been dealing with multiple injuries since. I'm still nursing my injuries today. It causes blurriness of vision. It causes dizziness, fainting, constant pain, stress, depression, all of it. Um, One of the things that I had no idea about is that when you get injury, because I've been coming here for years, I've never had a reason to go to the hospital. So I had no idea that when you get injured, you have no access to the benefits you're paying into. So when I got injured in COVID, if everyone can remember COVID, everyone was shut down, and it was just migrant workers that was coming. The airport was open only for migrant farm workers. Why? It doesn't matter what is happening in the world, people still need to eat. People get hungry. and we are the one that put the food on Canadians' table. So when I got injured, like most of us, we go trying to get help from the employer, which is not normally a good reception. Most of us get sent home, and for the ones that get to go to the hospital, the employer has the lead on everything. So they communicate what they want to the doctor. It's not um what is happening to you. It's not the injuries that you have, is what they tell them to do. So for me, going to the emerge, my employer would have talked to the doctor already and saying what she wanted to say. I didn't even get a prescription. All I got was two crutches that I couldn't use. And I was told to go back, and then I was ordered back to work, which I couldn't work. So the next thing is that they try to send you home because they don't want to report anything. I decided to stay because it's COVID and I know what healthcare is like back home. Even a family of mine died on the hospital floor back home within that period as well. So I decided to stay and get the healthcare. But I was in for a rude awakening because then I learned that I couldn't have access to anything. I was denied everything that I tried to get access to, the EI, all of the taxes we have to pay, just like a Canadian citizen, but we get none of the benefits. And so everything that I do, every scan, I have to pay out of pocket. And those scan is costing me over $2,000 for every scan that I do. Um, this is the reality for migrant workers. And it is very sad that in a first world country, where we are paying all the taxes, and I don't understand it, that we are paying all of it, but we can't have access to these benefits, that we are denied, we are exempt from everything. We are exempt from the communities, we are exempt from overtime, we're exempt from holiday pay, everything that is set up for everyone else. We don't get training, we don't get protection for any area. And so we know that without healthcare is life. If you don't have it, then small things, little injuries become greater injuries. You deteriorate until, well, like God rest her soul, Nell Toussaint, which I have had the honor of receiving the award for. It was a really sad case for me because I know the amount of workers that, have died over the years because this program have been from, like, this is the 60th year for the program. So I was really honored to receive that award, and recognizing how hard she has fought. But even so, she died with more than she started out to fight with. And I'm saying, what can we do? How can we pull together? How can we press the government to make the changes of the unjust policies that they have put in place to keep Black and brown people oppressed? Because these are the people that I see that is having blockage from the system, even though we are paying into it. Everyone have a family. Everyone, when they are injured, they need health care. Whether you're black, brown, white, it doesn't matter what color, race, or class you are supposed to get health care. You're supposed to have access to it. And so um, I really don't want another to die. Toussaint has gone, and many of the other co-workers that I know have gone. Many are injured today, still nursing their injuries. Some can't walk, some, like myself, have different kind of things happening to them and still have no access to the healthcare that they need. You're sent home, but you can't work, so you're forced into poverty. You're forced to beg. They say that you're taking over soup kitchens and you're taking over houses for people that have never even been in the community. We are in the bunkhouse. We are told not to go beyond the gate. We are told not to have visitors, but yet we are taking over. I am saying the government should put things in place so that migrant workers can have access to healthcare, can have access to proper housing, proper treatment. When you're tied to one employer, it doesn't matter what they're doing to you. You can't use you're stuck. They keep your passport, they keep everything for you. And when you're injured, before getting you the help that you need, that you have been paying into, they send you home. It has to change. The racist setup has to change. People are dying, families are being crushed, children are being, left out. They can't go to school because their parents they can't afford to send them to school. They can't afford the medication. I asked for status on arrival because without status, you can't have access to the benefits that you have been paying into Canada. You can't afford medication. You can't have access to medication because you need everything that you need status to do it. And when you don't have that, then as it is designed, it's by design that you're blacked out. So in order for migrant workers to have access to medication, to healthcare, to anything at all, to all the benefits, as I said, we are asking for status on arrival for all migrant workers. We're asking for the old colonial system that has been put in place since 1966 to be uprooted and a new system be put in place where people can have access to the things that they are paying into. We shouldn't have to tell the government that we are human. We shouldn't have to tell them that we need training, we need safety gears just like everyone else. Why are we sent to spray chemicals that is poisoning us? Why are we sent to climb to heights where no one is allowed to climb to without a harness? Why are we sent to do jobs that no one else will do? But yet we are being oppressed and chastised for it when we are asking, can you please give us some harness? Can you please give us some gear so that we won't be poisoned? So that we can live long enough to see our children to school? So that we can live long enough to take our care of our aging parents? Everything we are asking, it is not something out of reach. It's simple, simple things that everyone else is getting. If a Canadian is sent to do a job in some rural area, things are being set up for them. There's recreational areas. There's things put in place so that they can have the access that they need. They get the training that they need. We have none of these things. And we are saying, put these things in place so we can have them because we are paying into these systems. And in order for anything to change, it has to start with the contract that they have signed from 1966, that nothing has changed 60 years this year, and nothing has changed about the program. And we're saying there is no more tying. Stop tying us to one employer. We are not afraid to work. We are working. Personally, I work most of the time over 18 hours, and a lot of others have. We are not afraid to work. We come to work. And so we are saying, put things in place that every one of us can have access to the healthcare, to everything that is needed, so we can also go back home safely to our families, and so that they can have, um, well, we all can have a better life. Our children can have a future. And for future people that are coming, they don't have to worry about, getting access to healthcare when they're injured. Thank you.
I should put my head in the front? Okay. I apologize, everybody. I'm having a bad hair day because I didn't comb my hair since last week. Who's next? You want to talk about Toussaint? Thing first? All right. Meredith, I'm gonna ask if you could say a few words looking at the history of IAVGO, the Industrial Accident Victims Group of Ontario, and the work that we've done with you or that you've done around Denville Clark, Kenroy Williams, Kavan, and the most recent deeming case. And what are some of the issues that you see and the inconsistencies? But I also want to put the word inconsistencies in brackets because, as Alicia said, this is by design. We've created a system by design to deny people access to healthcare, equal access. So, Meredith, the floor is yours, and yeah, you can start.
Thanks, Chris. I thought I told you I'm not following Alicia anymore, but I will. But note that I know I'm not nearly as good. So anyway, okay, thank you so much for having me. Really honored to speak at this event. So IAPCO is a community legal clinic. We support injured workers in Ontario, and we have worked through partnerships with Justicia, with many migrant farm workers under both the Senior Agricultural Worker Program and other programs. As people will know, these programs are built on a structure that manufactures precarity. In the SOP, for example, as Alicia has talked about, workers are medically screened as fit for heavy labor, are tied to a single employer, and then routinely discarded when they are injured or become ill. So today I'm honored to share 3 stories of migrant workers who have fought against unfair and discriminatory denials of healthcare support. The first is Denville Clark and Kenroy Williams and their fight for OHIP coverage. The second is Kavan Smith and his human rights victory for OHIP access for migrant workers. And the third is Leroy Thomas and a breakthrough win that he had in the workers' compensation system. So together, the work that these workers have done have exposed and hopefully opened some cracks in a system of disposability, but there's still just so long to go. So first, Denville and Kenroy's fight around OHIP. Denville and Kenroy were injured back in 2012 in a serious workplace accident. They needed to stay. They're both working in the SOP, and at first, the employer tried to send them home and repatriate them without even getting the healthcare they needed from the serious workplace injury. They were able to stay through a fight back on their own part and the support of organizers like Justicia and family to intervene and be able to stay in Ontario to even have a chance at treatment. But what they needed was meaningful healthcare support. And so they challenged the government's position. And what it told them was that their healthcare, though their OHIP, had to end on December 15th, which is the last day of the agricultural season per the contract under the SOP program. And they said, we don't agree. That policy's not right. We don't agree with you that the law says our OHIP has to end on December 15th. And we, in fact, really need to be here and we need healthcare. And in 2013, they actually were successful at the healthcare board that deals with OHIP appeals, which was actually like pretty incredible, a pretty unusual argument that they made and successful. Now, shamefully, the government challenged their win. And the win just said, listen, if a worker comes here and they're hurt in work for us and they need healthcare, and they can't go home, they need to be here for healthcare, the law allows them to continue to get healthcare. But the government didn't agree, and so they challenged the workers, Denville and Kenroy's win in the court. And sadly, the government was successful and the court overturned their victory, meaning that they were no longer entitled to OHIP after the end of the contract. Even though they lost in court, they did win an acknowledgement from the panel hearing their case. So the court said that there was a gap in access in healthcare coverage for injured and sick migrant workers and urged the federal and provincial governments to arrive at an agreement to fill in that gap, which notably has still not happened. So their case really exposed this kind of fundamental problem where we are profiting from farm workers while denying them access to healthcare. The second story I want to tell you is about Kevon Smith. So Kevon also was injured in a serious workplace injury while he was working on the SOP. And he also had his OHIP ended unfairly. And in this case, even more outrageously, his OHIP ended when the employer decided that he had gone so-called AWOL and fired him. So the government said, well, sorry, your employer fired you, so you don't have access to healthcare anymore. And Kevon took that to the Human Rights Tribunal of Ontario and said, that's abject discrimination. You're tying my access to healthcare to my employer's whims and decisions. And in this case, it was actually a discriminatory firing. You're tying my healthcare to my employer, meaning you can be, as soon as you're injured, you can be immediately stripped of your right to healthcare. So Kevon took that to the Human Rights Tribunal and he did win. So in that case, the government agreed with Kevon that their policy allowing them to strip workers of their OHIP coverage based on being fired was wrong, and they changed it in a public settlement and apologized to Kevon for that policy that they had been applying. And the third, so that was a significant success, but still workers are denied healthcare after the end of the contract. So workers here continue to be denied OHIP, even if they are seriously injured, even if they're injured on the job. They have no access to healthcare after the end of the contract. So this is a huge systemic problem. And then another story I want to tell you is about Leroy Thomas. Leroy Thomas had a very significant legal victory in a different, so not an OHIP case directly, but a case about workers' compensation benefits work, which are absolutely so critical for workers' access to healthcare and recovery supports. Leroy Thomas had come from Jamaica to Ontario every year for 16 years before he was injured on the job in 2018. And the injury that Leroy suffered ended his ability to work in Ontario because it stripped from him his ability to do the farm labor he used to do, and it ended his ability to be a barber at home in Jamaica. Despite the serious injury he suffered and the loss he had of not being able to work anymore, the WSIB paid him only 3 months of loss of earnings benefits because they said that it was his immigration status that was stopping him from working, and that if not for that immigration status, 16 years, yeah, 16 years, yeah, 60 or 60, yeah. So he worked for 16 years, which is which is a lifetime, in terms of careers. So the board said, listen, we know that you can't work anymore. But if it weren't for your immigration status, we know you can't work in farm work here, but you could be a parking lot attendant in Ontario. So you don't have a loss of earnings, because if you were here and you were allowed to work in Ontario legally, you could be a parking lot attendant and you would not be losing any money. And this is despite the fact that Leroy had been repatriated home to Jamaica, was not legally allowed to return to work in Ontario, and had no ability to access Ontario's labor market. When it denied Leroy loss of earning support, meaning any support for his loss of livelihood, it also denied him any retraining support or any support to return to work. Really, this is like the classic case of just treating people as disposable, just exploiting Leroy's labor and then completely abandoning him when he got hurt and wasn't useful anymore. And as a result, his family fell into poverty, and talking about how that affects your life and your health. At times, Leroy went without enough to eat in order to feed his family after this happened to him and after the WSIB treated him like this. So, he knew this wasn't right, and he said, like, I gotta fight this. And he actually fought it, this issue with 3 other migrant workers who had similarly been denied access to workers' compensation benefits. And in 2023, he was successful. So the tribunal agreed with Leroy that the WSIB was wrong and illegal, and it ordered the WSIB to pay him benefits based on his actual losses. The injury essentially prevented him from working in Ontario, and it ordered him to be compensated for that loss. As a as a result of Leroy's victory and the victory of the other workers, the WSIB did actually change its policy. So that is a significant win. And that win came after about 20 years of fighting from organizers and workers on the ground. So it wasn't a matter of a legal case, right? This was a case that was many, many years in the making, that was successful because of organizing, pressure, media, and research by researchers working directly with workers. And that's the only way it had any shot of winning. And that's why it won. So the WSIB has changed its policy, but of course, like any of these, government programs, it does the absolute minimum. So that's what it did. It changed its policy for workers in the seasonal agricultural worker program to some extent, but it continues to exclude and marginalize all kinds of people, including workers in other migrant worker programs who have not had the benefit or continue to be denied benefits based on their immigration status. It excluded older workers. It excluded workers based on the type of injury they had. It even, with the way the WSIB is acting now, it again is just arbitrarily denying workers in the SOP as well support. But nonetheless, really an incredible victory for migrant workers who have fought together against these racist structures. And it definitely is inspiring to have worked alongside workers fighting like this for now. I think we got looped in by Chris into this work about 20 years ago. And it's really been the honor of I think everyone at the clinic would say this has been the honor of our lives, the honor of our clinic. It's really such an important fight, and we're so delighted to have played some small part in it. So thank you. And thanks for having me here.
I muted you from a distance.
But I have biting social commentary that I may want to give, no? All right, so a couple of things. There's a few more people I want to acknowledge. Consuelo, are you here still? Is Consuelo still here? Consuelo played a tremendous role right from the beginning about migrant workers' access to employment insurance benefits. Because of some of your work 25 years around special benefits, millions of dollars at that time were able to be provided to workers. And once again, the narratives are important here. As a result of what Consuelo did many years ago, a baby's life was saved. Okay, if that child did not get that money, his life would not have, he wouldn't be here, right? And this is money that's being denied to workers continuously. There are two types of benefits under EI. There's special benefits, which are parental and maternity benefits, and there's also regular benefits, which this court case is about too. But Consuelo plays a pivotal role in this work. Number two, the role of organizing, right? When you read a media story or when you read a legal doctrine or case, you're not going to see the voices of workers, the voices of organizing, the voices of people. And that's what we're also trying to talk about here as well too. And the incredible things that people have been happening and doing for decades and decades and decades. Some of the people, Jessica Ponting, Jessica Tellez, have also been important about the Denville and Ken Roy's case around access to healthcare. And part of the important work is definitely attributed to both of them. We've got people joining from all across the world. We've got somebody in Colombia. We've got a bunch of people in Jamaica, people from British Columbia, people from all over the damn place are here today too, right? So this is, I guess, building on a larger project, a political project. So one of the things that we've been involved in a couple of years ago, and with IAVCO and the Injured Workers Action for Justice, we actually had the honor a couple of years ago on the International Day for Migrant Workers, December 18th, to have Nell Toussaint, when she was alive, join us as a guest to talk about the issues. Yes. Oh, were you just scratching? Oh, okay. To talk about the particular issues that people with precarious immigration status were facing. And this was closer to the end of Nell's life, where she came to talk to workers, injured workers and allies about the conditions. Her conversation resonated because at that time, all these other people were facing very similar issues. We're going through very similar things. So we're going to talk a bit about our involvement right now as an intervener, a friend of the court in the Toussaint case. So speak a bit about the background of it and what our particular intervention is. And both, I'll ask Celia to introduce and to talk. And if Meredith wants to add anything, she can do so as well. So come on up. And would you like to put your camera facing the camera or no?
No, it's okay.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. Sorry. I have some notes because there are a lot of dates involved, and also I want to make sure I get the facts right about Nell's very historic and very important case. So she first came to Canada in 1999 from Grenada. She came as a visitor, but she worked her entire life in Canada since coming and supported herself and her family. Unfortunately, she developed some health issues that became very serious, and she was not covered by provincial health insurance at the time. So it was really a struggle for her. She was also trying to regularize her status as a permanent resident. She applied for temporary residence and permanent residence, but the fees were very expensive, as many of us may know, and they refused to process her applications. Oh, sorry, I thought there was a message there about being able to hear me. In 2009, she applied to a program called the Interim Federal Health Program. Some folks may know that this program is primarily known for assisting refugees, people who are in the process of making refugee claims while they're waiting for their claims to be heard. But this program is also for people who need emergency medical care. And the program itself, which I personally learned when we were working on this case, but I'm sure many knew before, was created for farm workers, ex-soldiers from Poland who are coming to Canada to live permanently. That program was created for them. So this program was for migrant farm workers, but migrant farm workers and many others cannot access it today. And Nell Toussaint was one of these individuals. She was not a farm worker, but she was a worker. So she applied to this program and they denied her access to the program. She went to the federal court to ask them to overturn this decision. And she asked them to make that decision on the basis of Canada violating her right to life and her right to equality, so her charter rights. She also asked them to change the whole program so that not just her, but many other people who've been denied benefits could also access them. The federal court issued a very disappointing and frankly racist decision where they denied her application. She then appealed it to the Federal Court of Appeal, and the Federal Court of Appeal also issued a very disappointing decision where they denied her again. And both of these courts made a lot of anti-immigrant comments where they alleged or they implied that migrants come here to use the system. They made veiled racist remarks, and Vasanthi will talk, I believe, more in depth about the comments that they made and the case as a whole in terms of the racist and racial dimensions. But both decisions, they denied Nell Toussaint access to interim federal health benefits. It's called the Interim Federal Health Program. She then tried to go to the Supreme Court of Canada, but you can't, unfortunately, just go to the Supreme Court of Canada. You have to ask them for permission, and they didn't want to hear her case. So she was stopped right at that point. So she didn't give up. She decided to go to the UN Human Rights Committee, and she went there in 2012, I believe. And finally, the UN Human Rights Committee, they agreed with Nell that her right to life had been violated when Canada refused to give her access to emergency health care through the Interim Federal Health Program. And the UN also ordered Canada to take all necessary measures to ensure that everybody who needs emergency health care in Canada, regardless of their status, should get it. So this was a victory, but it was also a victory that took 9 years. This started in 2009. And she got this decision in 2018. And even then, Canada ignored the decision. Canada said, we don't have any obligation to give healthcare to people who aren't migrants here or who aren't valid or documented in Canada. So in 2021, Nell filed a lawsuit against the Canadian government, and that is the case that we're involved in now. This lawsuit has a bunch of different remedies that she requested. Again, these are remedies not only for her, but for all migrants, particularly undocumented migrants in Canada. She asked them again to order Canada to change the program so that people who don't have status can still access essential healthcare. Canada tried to get the case dismissed because they said this has already been to the court, so why are we doing it again? Thankfully, and I believe in part due to the numerous different organizations that intervened at that point, so also came forward as friends of the court dismissed Canada's objection and the case proceeds. So that is where we became involved. We asked the court if we could come forward and participate as friends of the court. And by we, I again mean IAVGO, the Industrial Accident Victims Group of Ontario, Justice for Migrant Workers, and the Migrant Farm Worker Legal Clinic. We together formed a coalition, the Migrant Worker Coalition, and we requested to bring forward the perspectives of migrant workers who, as I mentioned, are not, Nell Toussaint is not a migrant worker. I don't know if she would have called herself a migrant worker, but migrant workers are affected by this case because a lot of migrant workers end up in situations where they can't access healthcare because Canada is so insistent that people must have immigration status to be able to access healthcare. Migrant workers' immigration status is precarious at best. Lots of migrant workers go out of status when they're here. They go in between different types of statuses. They may start as a worker, but they may become visitors. And so they would be affected by this case. And that is at least part of the reason why we became involved. It was, again, we first became involved in 2023 and the courts allowed us to participate or gave us permission to participate in December 2024. And even though that happened more than a year ago, the case has still not even moved forward a little bit. It's still stuck in a bunch of procedural issues. So there are legal things going on, but as I'm sure many others and Chris will talk about, the legal stuff is not the end all and be all. And if we're going to wait for the law to catch up with what we want to happen, we're going to be waiting forever because the law is not enough by itself or at all. So this is an important case for undocumented workers, for migrant farm workers. And in our arguments, we talked about the fact that although migrant workers are not the subject of this case, the way that they have to navigate the system, the structural issues that they face, migrant farm workers are affected. And the court clearly agreed because they gave us permission to intervene as friends of the court. I don't know if I should say that.
Sure. Yeah.
I feel like I've been talking a lot.
No. Everybody's like, you're in awe right now. They're like, wow.
I'll just end with a couple of points based off of some of the arguments that we made or that we wanted to make at the court. We brought forward the perspective or the points that access to healthcare for migrant workers is extremely limited. Yes, in theory, when migrant workers come to Canada, they get provincial healthcare, but this idea or fact is completely overshadowed by the fact that there's a huge power imbalance between migrant workers and the employers. So they might have access, but they're not going to actually get access. Employers terminate workers, employers send workers home, employers just deny workers access to any type of healthcare. If workers are injured on the job, there's no guarantee or understanding that workers are going to be able to get any type of treatment. And as Meredith discussed, WSIB benefits, workers might be able to get them, but they're not in practice, they're not going to, employers don't tell them about it. And even if employers did tell them, employers don't allow them to access WSIB. So we brought up all these points and more in our submissions, and the court pretty much reproduced them in the decision, which was interesting. And I'll also link the decision when he finished talking, where a lot of the points that we made were brought forward. And Meredith, myself, Vasanthi, Alex Ivovich, who's also with IAVGO, and some of our law students all work together along with Chris and other Justicia folks to bring forward our claims based on what workers have been telling us over the decades. So this is an important case, and we hope that at the trial we get to bring forward these perspectives even more, and it helps the court make a good decision. But in the meantime, we'll still continue to organize and hopefully in Nell give, I don't know how to say.
Justice for now.
Yes.
All workers.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so just three very brief comments. The thread that we're seeing, and we saw this in Williams and Clark versus Ontario in healthcare, and we're also seeing this in Toussaint, is the underlying racism and xenophobia. So in the Clark-Williams case, the government lawyers talked about opening up the floodgates, right? The idea that the other, racialized other, are just going to be draining our healthcare system, stealing once again from us, right? We see the same type of racial motifs in the EI case and also in Toussaint, right? So very much racism and xenophobia are at the core of these issues. It's not about just legal technicalities, so we don't play in that game. Oh, sorry, I just got cut out.
Sorry, I just wanted to add one more thing. During this whole process, the government of Canada was violently opposed to not just us, but a lot of the people who wanted to intervene, or a lot of the groups that wanted to intervene in this case, to the point where they made personal attacks against workers, against the people that we work with. And they brought this up in front of the judge. So it's not just, again, like Chris said, it's not just the legal stuff, it's also this is what these people really believe. They don't think that migrants should be able to access healthcare. They don't think that migrants should be able to have basic dignity, basic freedom, basic rights in this country. So yeah, that's just something.
Well, yeah, I was just going to add that, right? They particularly hated us and they didn't want us. And number three, right? So what we're all trying to say here is that we cannot rely on the law, right? Who the hell has 10 years or 15 years of their damn lives, right? Life's too short. None of us can spend 10, 15, 20 years, nor should we, trying to fight legal cases. We don't have those resources. This is why we've got to think outside and think about how do we put our resources to organizing with people and doing things that the law may not like, shall we say. Okay, so we've got two speakers left. Ready? Okay. Okay, all right. Okay, so Vasanti, Dr. Venkatesh, are you with us? Both physically, morally, spiritually? Are you here?
Yes, yes, I am.
Okay, are you on a VIA train?
No, I just got home. I had to take some medicine, so I'm so sorry to miss not be there in person. It's been crazy.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us. Thank you for and you know the way that I didn't get a chance to tell Vasanti this, but you know we could like this is like 150 more people who are going to read your paper, dude. Okay, and they're going to share that with 5 other people. I have copies in my office for 550. If you want to buy a copy off of me, that's cool too. But you know, Vasanti's piece about Toussaint is critically important. So I was wondering if you could provide some context and speak about what some of the issues that you saw in your paper.
Okay, so I think so what I want to talk about and is, as we've heard, that something like healthcare should be is such a basic fundamental right, right? And it's deliberately and systematically denied on the pretext of immigration status. And we've all heard like how this denial isn't an accident. It isn't a result of a neutral system. But what I want to talk about is how it's justified and perpetuated by these set of very powerful stories or myths that are repeated over and over again by our courts, our government, the general public, and unfortunately by racialized people, by the left movement, by other migrants who have got status, and so on. And so this term that is used that I want to use is called moral panic. And a lot of the theory is from people like Stuart Hall and others who have talked about it. So what moral panic is and how it's constructed is that there's a very systemic way in which it goes about. There's nothing commonsensical about it, okay? So first, a panic is created out of proportion to the actual threat. And then after that, this panic is mobilized against very specific people, people who they can cast as what is called folk devils, people who they can call names, people who they can stereotype, who they can prejudice. And then they appeal to law and order. And at some point, the myths become so pervasive that they become a kind of common sense, which is what Tanita was explaining. It's used by the courts too. It's common sense. But what I want to show is that there is nothing sensible or commonsensical about any of them. Okay, and there is a political choice. And the three myths that are very commonly used that you all must have heard that I want to address. First is the myth of the free rider. Second, the myth of the strange system. And the third, the slippery slope, the idea of the barbarians at the gate. So let's start with the first myth, right? And this idea is that people like Nell Toussaint, Alicia, and so on are free riders, that they're taking advantage of the Canadian system, that they're undeserving, that it's audacious for them to even claim a right to Canadian healthcare. And Tanita said, it is explicit in the decision in the Federal Court of Appeals decision. I mean, Justice Stratus, who wrote it, started out the decision by saying, even though Toussaint had disregarded Canada's immigration laws for the better part of a decade, she's trying to benefit from the Canadian system. She's framed as exploiting loopholes and disregarding the law. Okay, and it's a very powerful language because it paints a picture of a deviant individual, a folk devil who's trying to steal the resources that they haven't earned. Okay, and to challenge this framing, I'm not going to use the language of who has contributed more or who is more deserving or who earns it, because that framework I want to tell is a trap, because we need to speak the language of reparative justice. Okay, and there's this brilliant thinker called Shivanandan, and he put it this way, and I'm just paraphrasing: migrants cost Canada nothing. In fact, their country of origin, countries in the global south, Jamaica, Mexico, Haiti, Grenada, and so on, and their families and communities have already paid for them. They invested in their childhood, their education, their health, their upbringing, everything. And they were reared and raised by countries whose wealth and resources were not only stolen and extracted by countries like Canada during colonialism, it goes on now through neocolonialism and imperialism. So really, if you listen to all the stories that Meredith and Alicia have said, who is the real free rider? It is Canada. It is Canada that is living off the unjust enrichment of billions of dollars from the very nations these migrants come from, and billions of dollars from the labor of the migrant workers themselves. And and all of it is to fuel the capitalist development of Canada. So I want to talk a bit more about Nell Toussaint's story itself, not just the case, because it shows this. She was born in Grenada and she followed the typical migration path of Black Caribbean women since the 1800s. Like many Caribbean people, she lost her livelihood in Grenada in a transatlantic political economy rooted in neocolonialism. She lost her job. She had a job in a Canadian pharmaceutical company in Grenada, and there was a hurricane. The company closed down, filed for bankruptcy, made a lot of money, and then she came to Canada in 1999 on a visitor visa. And the reason why she came on a visitor visa is because there's no other program which she could come with full rights. It was the only option for her. And then, like many black and racialized women, she worked in low wage sectors, hazardous sectors, childcare, cleaning, factory work, whose occupational hazards have always led to chronic health issues. So she developed an abscess, chronic fatigue, and then because of that, she lost her job. She was forced into poverty. She resorted to selling discarded cans and aluminium for some income. And then she began to suffer. Her illnesses became worse and worse from several interconnected chronic illnesses, diabetes, chronic fatigue syndrome, uterine fibroids, renal dysfunction. And it's a classic case of how health problems just multiply because of the number of hazards that are put on people like Nell. And because she did not receive a timely health care, she was rendered permanently disabled from the amputation of one leg, the loss of her eyesight, kidney failure, a stroke, and a brain injury from the heart failure. With all of these injuries, she fought her case all the way through the Canadian courts, all the way to the United Nations, and she won in the United Nations, which found that Canada was in breach of basic human rights by denying her health care. Then the a case came back, which Tanita described, and in the midst of the ongoing case, she passed away in on January 9th, 2023, about 3 years back. So tell me, how is she a free rider? In fact, there's no bigger free rider than a system that extracts human capital like this without paying for it. It extracts from people like Nell, Alicia, Danville, Leroy, their communities back home, their countries back home without paying. In fact, and I want you to think about this, every one of us in this room who has access to healthcare because of our status or our class, in a way, we are free riding on the backs of those who have no access because it is their labor, their very presence, and the extraction of the global south, which is subsidizing our comfort, our healthcare, and our whole welfare state. So it is what we call in law an unjust enrichment. It's an expropriation. Okay. And this brings me to the second myth, the idea that providing healthcare for all would be an unbearable strain and our system would collapse. The argument is we barely have a functioning healthcare system now. How can we possibly open the doors to anyone? And this is especially common in the left movement, the labor movement, and even among racialized and immigrants too, that we have to strengthen the Canadian welfare state first, strengthen the healthcare problem for Canadians first. There is so much inequality among Canadians. We should do something for the poor people here. And this sounds very pragmatic, but it is a lie of distraction. If our healthcare is struggling, it's not because of the people it excludes. It's not because of people like Nell or people like Alicia. It's because of political choices about funding. Healthcare is not struggling because there isn't enough wealth. There's a lot of wealth. It is struggling because governments choose to underfund it at the expense of all the other priorities. Massive subsidies for corporations, endless increases in military defense spending, real estate speculation, and so on and so forth. So there's this economist, Jason Inkel, who has done this very interesting math. He calculated that globally, we need only about 30% of the world's productive capacity, all its labor, all its resources, all the world's entire GDP to not just satisfy the basic needs of all, like healthcare and education, but all the needs for a genuinely good life, such as good housing, computers, mobile phones, internet, and reliable transit. Okay, but so we are producing way more. The GDP is way more. So we are way more than enough. And the problem is not scarcity, the problem is distribution, right? We are building a system where the rich are subsidized to grow even richer, the free riders. And the rest are forced to fight a Hunger Games style battle for the right to live, for the right to decide who should get health care and who shouldn't. So it is a manufactured crisis, as with all moral crises. It makes us believe that people like Alicia and Nell are the threat, and instead of looking up at those who are hoarding the health. And also, it's a classic divide and rule strategy to maintain this hegemonic system by creating folk devils out of racialized people. But as I said before, the welfare state of Canada, of Europe, all the luxuries of US is all through the unjust enrichment and extraction from the very people that this welfare state is denied to. And finally, the third myth, the slippery slope, the barbarians at the gate. If you have healthcare for all, there'll be hordes of passport babies, anchor babies flooding our shore. In fact, the federal court was very explicit of this fear when they ruled against Nell Toussaint. It said that Canada, if we allowed Nell to have access to healthcare, Canada would become a healthcare, and I quote, safe haven that would encourage smuggling and dangerous migration. This is perhaps the most absurd myth of all because it's completely detached from reality. Let me ask you, how are these hordes of people supposed to get here? The Canadian border is one of the most heavily fortified and tightly closed borders in the world for those coming from the global south. It is shut so tight that for most people, legal entry is nearly impossible. The one land border Canada has is with the United States and is effectively sealed by the Safe Third Country Agreement, backed up by intense CBSA enforcement. So, what I want to say is that this is not about border security. It's not about this creating a healthcare safe haven. It is about racial control. And it's a continuation of colonialism. And how is that? Because the global movement of racialized peoples has always been engineered for white colonial interest. I mean, think about the language we use. A white person from the global north moves to Mexico, Panama, Jamaica, or Bali, like Canadians in winter. What are they called? They're called expats. Nobody finds this wrong. But when a person from Jamaica or Mexico tries to move in the opposite direction to Canada, often due to disasters like what Nell Toussaint faced, what are they called? Migrants, or worse, illegals. And this control of movement is not new, right? And I don't want to go through that. Deep historical roots, the Chinese head tax, continuous journey regulations designed to keep out people from China, from India, from the Caribbean, while you had the colonizers going all over the world, thinking that the whole world was a terra nullius, right? So the slippery slope is just a modern sanitized version of these explicitly racist policies that were there in during colonization. And borders, since it's a borders class, are a crucial instrument of this mass racial engineering. Okay, so to conclude, I just want to say that we have these three myths: free rider, strange system, barbarians at the gate, all of them constructed, all of them designed to justify cruelty and deny people their dignity. But I want to end with what Nell Toussaint said about this. In her affidavit, she writes this: I find it humiliating and degrading to have to negotiate with doctors and healthcare service providers to receive healthcare out of charity. And we heard what Alicia had to say too. She's not asking for charity. And this is the goal of these myths, right? To turn a right into a privilege, to turn a right into charity, to turn a human being into a beggar, to make a person feel humiliated and degraded for simply trying to stay alive. And we have to think about this as we think about even organizing against these myths and working together and getting inspiration from people like Nell, from people like Alicia, Leroy, who are fighting to create some kind of modicum of justice into a heavily unjust system. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think this also begs the question in university spaces about collegiality, and when we're engaging in systems of legal systems or political systems, and the fact that they want you to be civil. When you try to disrupt their spaces, they make it seem like you're the problem, right? So going back once again, if you're in a legal process or a parliamentary committee and you start getting angry, right? You're seen as a problem. But the problem is that people through the structural system of racism and racial violence have been denied equal access to healthcare. This unemployment insurance case that we're supporting, 60 years of workers have been denied benefits while people's houses and lives have been destroyed. So how the hell can we be civil and collegial in the face of violence? So I want us to think about that. And the last person that we shall call up for tonight is Tanya Carrera. Would you like to come up here? They couldn't hear you. But you can come right here, right next to me. Okay, I'll eat gum too, so just in case my breath's not bad or something. Oh yeah, so Tanya is just making her way. While she's making her way, I have some brief announcements. We have also launched, so thanks to Gabriel and Herbie and many others, we've launched a small claims case for 7 workers, all from St. Lucia, against Great Lake Farms. Great Lakes is one of these farms where workers have alleged that people get employed on a 2-year contract but are fired after a couple weeks, and then their entire lives have been disrupted. So this case has just been launched. So hopefully in the next little while, we'll have some more information about that. Encourage everybody online in the room to go to our Linktree account, Linktree/J4MW, sign the petition. In March, we have a bunch of other activities for Farm Worker Resistance Week and some other fun things. So just keep following us. Ready? Ooh, plug? Oh, you want to plug? What thing you do?
It's okay. There might be enough. There might be enough.
Yeah, we're good? Yeah. No? All right, so that is March. April, we're going to be honoring workers who died. And May, we have, and we also have a case. Did I say publicly, boss? Okay, so we have a case if you would like to mobilize for against Canadian workers who used to be employed at Canadian Tire. And that's going to be here. These are workers who were charged illegal recruitment fees. And we're also representing a group of workers for alleged wage theft. And in May, we've got a case we're mobilizing to bring people to Hamilton to support one of our comrades, a mushroom farm worker named Ada, who won her Ontario Labor Relations Board case. So now we are at the damages portion. So we're going to be going en masse, renting a bus, and eating chicken wings if you eat chicken wings. So please come on, May. And also in May, we're going to go to Ottawa, possibly to confront a boss who owes hundreds of thousands to workers. So yes. All right. So
Okay.
yes.
I'm not going to be anywhere as articulate or engaging as everyone else who spoke. But what I'm going to do is actually, I've made points as each person has spoken that I will speak to from my perspective coming from healthcare. So I'm a nurse practitioner, and pretty much all my work over the past 15 years has been with communities, both in Toronto, around Ontario, rural communities, and internationally at borders. So folks like migrant folks and folks who are from various marginalized communities. And I've been with Justice for Migrant Workers for 15 years. Actually became a nurse practitioner because of the work they were doing. But anyway, so that's sort of the lens that it's coming from. And I'm coming from a place where I truly, truly believe that health is a human right. We all should have the right to access health and to experience the best health possible, not as defined by the healthcare system,
not as defined by doctors or academia or anyone as we each define. So I'll kind of speak to some of those things as I go through, but one of the things that Alicia brought up in discussing her story was around the issue of coverage. And many of the speakers spoke to this, and it's common in the discourse around migrant workers and around folks with regularized status and such. So we talk about coverage, and we either talk about the need to have coverage, i.e. like to have OHIP or have IFH. And the way we talk about that is under the assumption that having that guarantees access. So I want to problematize even just like the idea of access. And I don't have an answer to that, but I just want to put it out there that it's a conversation to have with ourselves and with each other. Because there are a lot of assumptions there. And so with regards to, oh, well, the solution is for, everyone to have OHIP. Absolutely, I think everyone, let's say in Ontario or in a given province, should have access to whatever the public healthcare system is, yes, but it can't stop there, right? Because we have to understand that the barriers go far beyond whether or not you have that card and whether or not you're entitled to it. Even people who have OHIP, as some migrant farm workers do through the program, even those folks, or you yourselves here might have experienced it, even folks with some kind of coverage experience inaccess to care, right? And this is by way of all kinds of discrimination and gatekeeping that happens within the system. So just keep that in mind, that having healthcare coverage on paper or through a policy doesn't necessarily lead to actually getting that care. It's a much bigger thing. Now, if we can put that stuff aside and go back to the, what a policy says or what it means to have, let's say, a health card, there's also the issue that there are actually policies in place that are meant to protect folks from some of the stuff that's been discussed today and to ensure that folks who have that pathway to access do get those things, but they're not enforced. So for example, a lot of the stories here involved being asked for proof of OHIP or proof of coverage or even proof of citizenship. It's actually not written anywhere in healthcare policy or healthcare administrative policy that those things have to be asked for. We don't have to show our OHIP card in order to get the services that OHIP is supposed to give us. But not only that, within healthcare spaces, so within a hospital, within a clinic, at least in Toronto by sanctuary city policy, they're actually not even allowed to ask. So this is the idea of there are structures in place and they're not being enforced, they're not being observed, no one's being held accountable. The practices of clinicians and healthcare institutions are not being audited. And that's also some of the stuff that needs to happen. Another thing that came up was around navigating the healthcare system. I cannot stress what a huge issue that is. And this ties into the conversation around what is access and how do we get to these things, but it also ties into a bunch of other stuff. As a clinician, I have trouble navigating our healthcare system every day. Every day I'll have a moment of wanting to pull out my hair because I can't get through the various things that I need to get through to access something for a patient. So I can't begin to imagine, but I encourage you to try to imagine, and again, maybe you've already experienced this, how that must be for people in different positions, right? With different kinds of immigration status, different, literacy levels, different understandings of the healthcare system, what it's like to navigate that, right? Or you can understand all of it, but not have, the internet literacy to do all. So there's just all of these layers of things that you need to navigate. And as you add different different barriers and positionalities, it starts to become more and more complicated as these things compound each other. So if you can imagine in the case of a migrant worker with precarious status or potentially with no status, or anyone with precarious status, could be an international student, especially in now where lots of changes are being made to like student visas. There's going to be, you know, that puts a lot of international students in a place of precarity, and they're likely to end up irregularized. So all of these things that we're talking about affect a whole lot of people. So imagine being in those positions and trying to navigate this system. The other thing too is with regards to, like, back to this navigation piece and accessing WSIB. Again, anyone who's ever tried to access various government systems, so like WSIB or maybe OW, any of these, anyone who's navigated these processes for government support know that it is not straightforward. Again, I end up wanting to pull out my hair. It's all kinds of forms. How do those happen? Through a bunch of different healthcare visits. So imagine all the steps to make appointments. Then you wait forever to get an appointment. Then you hope that that person will even listen to you and be willing to fill out the paper. Because guess what? A lot of clinicians now practice from this really entitled position of, I get to decide about the care that I provide or don't provide. Actually, you don't. But again, since no one's auditing these things, a lot of folks get away with it. So you wait forever, multiple appointments, maybe you do or maybe you don't get your documents filled out. Those have to be filled out in a particular way. And it doesn't come down to whether or not a person has an injury or a medical need or a diagnosis or whatever. It's does the clinician, usually a doctor, does that person think they have that, right? And are they prepared to fill out this document indicating that? And that's also a complicated thing because it isn't just a straight algorithm where you're asking about signs and symptoms, and then you agree or disagree that they may or may not have a particular diagnosis, and then you fill out a paper. No, that is complicated by the discrimination and all of these other factors that we've talked about. So believe me, at some level, whether they're aware of it or not, or whether they're going to admit to it or not, clinicians and other folks as involved in these systems are also thinking about these things, about does this person deserve this or not? Or even themselves, like, do I want to spend 2 hours filling out this form? Because you know what? Some of the forms take that long if you do them properly. So there's all this stuff. So it isn't, you know, again, like, do they have access to WS? Could someone get WSIB? And if they get it, guess what? It's not a given. So it's not like you are somehow granted the thing that you're requesting through WSIB. They check up on you regularly. And that again involves interfacing with the healthcare system. And these interfaces with the healthcare system aren't just with anyone in the healthcare system. They're usually with the physician. And this also relates to like how OHIP and other provincial healthcare systems are designed, because we grossly don't understand those either. They don't entitle you to all kinds of care as defined however you want. It's physician determined care. It's access to a physician. It's access to medically necessary care. It's often not. So what does that mean for any kind of perspective that any other kind of health care provider might have? But the other important thing is that it's often not physicians that are doing this very important work with migrants and various other marginalized communities. And so that's really important to think about. The people who might be best positioned to speak to, let's say, a migrant worker's emotional or mental health state might be the community worker the advocate, the person in the migrant-facing organization who speaks with them and supports them regularly. We have folks here today, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to point them out, but we have folks here today who do that work. They're not the ones filling out those forms because the forms are designed to be filled out by doctors who, guess what, spend a lot of time and money also feeding into the system. It's all very controlled. None of this is an accident. That's my perspective. You can have your own, but this is from many years of working in this and looking at how all of these policies really unfold. So keep in mind as well, when you think about the various kinds of advocacy work and solidarity and all this kind of stuff, be careful or be cognizant of who we're envisioning in those positions, like who's doing this work. And we quickly romanticize and imagine, let's say if it's healthcare, that it's doctors. No, by and large, no. It's often not even actual, like, technically healthcare providers. It might be, there's a lot of nurses and social workers and other folks involved in that business, but it's often like community health workers, other kinds of community workers and advocates who are doing a lot of that work. And then with regards to the legal aspects, certainly lawyers are involved, but not necessarily like the fancy ones that we see on TV, right? Like they're scholars of law and policy. And then they're paralegals, and there are other folks who don't practice as lawyers, but are familiar with these structures and the discipline and this way of thinking. And so all of this work is coming from all of these spaces that we don't generally think about. And of course, a lot of this is coming from migrants themselves, migrant workers who are engaged in this work. A lot of the change, a lot of everything good that has come out has come from that. The only other thing that I wanted to highlight was around, I think Vasanthi brought it up around this healthcare crisis. And so she spoke very well to it. So I really just want to echo that and say that, as she said, it's not about a lack of resources. It is a gross and willing mismanagement of resources and a tremendous lack of oversight. The various public systems across Canada, and especially in Ontario, BC, and Alberta, have had and continue to have an immense shift to privatization. And that has implications for absolutely everyone, no matter what your immigration status or any other status is. If you're here and you use any of those systems, unless you're very wealthy, you are or will be impacted by these things. And this is within a country that absolutely has the resources. I see it every day, all the time, from within the healthcare system. The money spent and thrown away, the waste of resources, the lack of communication within systems, like it's crumbling because it's poorly managed, it's poorly understood, and also because a lot of the people doing a lot of the meaningful work are so stuck in that work and all of the frustration and fatigue of doing it that it's hard to find the opportunity to come together and talk about it and voice what's going on and strategize about what the heck to do. I think that's it.
Good. Thank you. Thank you so much. Right. Just a few things. So OW is Ontario Works for anybody who's not from Ontario. That's our formerly system known as welfare. ODSP, Ontario Disability Support Program. Also important to note that most, and Ratika, I think you're still online. You can always contradict me, but most SOP workers, farm workers, TFWs can get access to OW or ODSP. There might be some particular cases for undocumented people, but most people are excluded from the social safety net. So I wanted to just to emphasize that. Also, too, right now, as always, but we're in a really serious situation of xenophobia. In the last couple of months, we know that the federal government has introduced a co-payment system for peeps who are on interim federal health, which is horrific and extremely racist. And what we see in Alberta, besides really bad beef, they are also engaging in a campaign where they're trying to deny temporary foreign workers access to healthcare and having referendum questions which are steeped in anti-immigrant rhetoric. So definitely these are some things that we should be quite concerned about.
Sorry, just wanted to in terms of like healthcare access and what's covered. For migrant work, a lot of migrant workers in particular, especially in the agricultural sector and some of the service sectors, some of the highest needs are around mental health as relates to isolation and chronic precarity. And that is not something that's really included in healthcare unless you go to a primary clinician who then maybe sends you to a psychiatrist, right? And even then, that's usually not necessarily the indicated person. People need to maybe speak to a therapist, a social worker, or some other kind of provider. But these systems only provide for that super medicalized pathway. And often to even access that, again, there's this issue of diagnosis. So being chronically stressed or chronically worried about your state of precarity might not necessarily neatly translate into a diagnosis of depression or generalized anxiety. And then that might keep you from accessing these things. Conversely, it can even be sort of weaponized against you. So if someone at some point does get a diagnosis of some kind of mental health diagnosis, later on it can be used to say, oh, well, this person was mentally unwell, therefore whatever they're complaining about now is less valid, right? And so again, just back to how like all of these things are kind of entangled.
Thank you. Just had an announcement before to get to that. Give it up again for this amazing panel. Definitely some of our favorite people and people who are pivotal for our work. And I think this is also an important space to highlight a lot of voices that have been excluded from this conversation. So amazing panel. I just received something I got to plug. So in support of the Jamaica Household Workers Union, which is a domestic worker that's been ravished and destroyed as a result of hurricane, the most recent hurricane, there's a fundraiser that's taking place this Friday, February 27th, 967 College Street at the Society Clubhouse. So if you can't come to this important fundraiser. So I wanted to share that. Once again, we've got a bunch of events happening in March. Come check some of that stuff out. I want to thank everybody who's joined. We had well over 100 people come out to this thing. So that's been 2 events with over 100 and something people in 2 months. And hopefully March will do the same. And Tunisia will pay people in doubles and for that to happen next semester. Maybe in the last 10 minutes, are there any questions, comments, critiques that people, oh, you've got a question. You want to come up, you got to come up. Nobody can hear you. You got to put your, like, literally your face right in the camera.
So my question actually is derived from Alicia's sharing and Tanya sharing as well. So my question is, in Alicia's situation, and I hope this is articulated correctly, where the employer spoke to medical staff and minimized the extent of her injuries. In the absence of a power of attorney to advocate for a person who, for instance, cannot advocate for themselves, are there not provisions under provincial law and ensuing hospital administration that provide for confidentiality and autonomy of the patient to speak for themselves to the extent of their injuries for which they are seeking care?
You want to start off with, do you want if Tanya starts?
I'm only going to contribute
I'm
only going to contribute a small piece only because I'm not I don't have a legal background. But I will say that there's so much power in favor of the medical establishment and so many things in place, so many structures in place to protect folks in that system, particularly those of a lot of power, i.e. doctors and high-level hospital administrators and the hospital as a corporation. Don't forget that now hospitals are corporations. There's so much in place to protect what's going on there that even if there are, and I think there are policies in place, it's not enforced or it's difficult to enforce. I will say though, from a professional perspective, yes, there are professional guidelines and ethical obligations that need to be upheld that would be in the favor of the patient, always in favor of the patient. But those are very rarely invoked in these situations. Why? I don't know. So you're on the right path that there's these things that are supposed to be to protect folks, but we're back to this conversation of that they're not observed, they're not enforced, they're not audited, etc. And people in power behave as though they have the option to overlook them or to manipulate them in some way.
As a non-professional, I'm going to turn this back to you because the reason why I'm turning it back to Tanya, and I was actually hoping you would say this, is that a couple years ago, we had a situation where there was an injured migrant worker, I believe in the Haldeman, Norfolk area. And Tanya rightly pointed out the subcontract and the fact that medical information so we've had a concern for multiple years where the employer and supervisors are actually in the room when workers are going through their private issues. But in addition to that, the medical records are shared with the government officials and the employers and the employer organizations, which is a total infringement of other health rights. And you're the first person to identify that, right? And so
and actually some situation, but for example, and then found out that this is the case in other spaces. I remember going with a worker to the hospital, and through interactions with the staff there, I found out that the default, I think this is what you're thinking, the default is to indicate the employer as the next of kin. The default. So the worker is never asked. There's never a conversation about this. It is the default. So the worker like unknowingly relinquishes this right. And then when I asked the nurse about this, she was like, oh, well, they can just opt out. How can you opt out of something that you didn't know, you weren't even aware of? And on the off chance that it was displayed to them in a document or mentioned by a person in that moment, what are the odds that you're going to make sense of it in that moment? And I don't say this in the sense of like intellectually, are you going to make sense of it? I mean, in the context of the stress of being at the hospital and anything else that's going to play into that. Thank you.
I just lost my train of thought. Sorry. It's okay.
Oh, sorry, one other thing.
Yeah.
This whole like having the information shared with an employer or the other related situation is having the employer or someone who's like a sort of a right hand of the employer accompanying workers to healthcare spaces, so clinics and hospitals. So a complication of that obviously is that workers are going to be less willing or comfortable, understandably, to share that information, to disclose probably critical pieces of health-related information.
Yeah.
So it really shapes those encounters in very, very important ways that are completely against the priorities of the patient or the worker.
So just once again, I know we talked a little bit about the EI case, and the EI case talked about the tied work permit as an obstacle. One of the things that's missing from the decisions, the employer-driven nature of this program, and some of the other work that we've been involved with around the racial profiling, the DNA case, the similarities that Tanya is talking about, what we see there is we actually don't see agency or any humanity with workers. Workers are seen as property of the employer. And to the extent of what Tanya is talking about here, basically the onus, everything goes back to the employer. This is the way that workers are positioned throughout the countryside.
So in a lot of cases, the employers keep the health cards of workers. And this is a huge problem that also ties into this whole demanding of OHIP in order to get what OHIP owes you. If you don't have that card in your pocket, that's another layer of being denied care. And often in the case of workers, it might be the employer who has, so you can't go and ask for the card because that's frightening because it might lead to problems. So you don't. Or you skip it and go to the hospital, but you don't have the card. You're supposed to get that service, but you don't, because according to them, no card means no service, except that's not how it's supposed to work.
And on the other side, you've got, and I'm sure some of the sisters and brothers could also talk about this. We've got lots of workers who go an entire season without getting an actual health card. So we got the two, I won't even say extremes, the two options. The employer holds it, or the employer doesn't bother to get it for them.
Or they don't, or they lose their status because of some employment related situation, and then they're irregularized and they no longer have a health card. So
yeah,
there's those three versions of what that could be.
Oh wow. They can't hear you. You gotta come put your face right here.
There's also an option where if a worker gets an open work permit for vulnerable workers when they allege abuse against an employer, Service Ontario denies workers their health cards then too, even though they have a valid one.
One last thing.
Yeah,
Sorry.
we got to say
that whole thing.
Okay.
And for those, and this comes up in sort of policy discussions, for those that go to the question or the suggestion of, well, why don't they just pay out of pocket? Out of pocket costs are terrible, even at the OHIP rates. But the trend in the last few years is that where someone doesn't have coverage, they're being charged way beyond OHIP rates. So it isn't even, can you cover this already expensive OHIP rate? It's, can you cover this arbitrarily chosen and exorbitantly high cost? We're talking hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of dollars for things. So it's not that easy. It's not that people are saying, I can't or won't pay 20, 30, 40, 50, even $100. It's hundreds and thousands of dollars. It's money that I think most of us here don't have, never mind someone who's in an extremely precarious situation.
All right. I think it's 7:53. We'll take one question online, only one question, and then we got a boogie. So anybody want to say?
Can I just add something?
Sure.
Yeah, just to add to what she was saying, I mean, the situation for me is that, um, yeah, you have to go and do the health card, but you never get it until you're going home. And when I got injured, the employer write on a piece of paper, send it um with the worker that he gives to drive, and that is what they give to the doctor. The doctor then call on they talk on the phone, and then they make decision what she tell me I have to pick a spot while I'm in pain, can't move and stuff. So and he will not look at anything else, he says. So this is what the situation is. And even when I go to the other doctor, after that, it was the same thing. I told them my name and they knew everything. So all he did was write me for pain prescription for painkillers for the when I went to the emergency room, I didn't even get a prescription, as I said. So the workers have zero right. We are called stocks. We are not seen as people. So I just wanted to add that it is true what she's saying, because this is my experience, and this is for other people that has gone to the doctor with me. This is the same situation. We have zero rights here, and you don't get to say anything. For the person that asks about the liaison is for the employer, not for the worker. We pay them $75 every paycheck. But even now, I still haven't seen the liaison since my injuries. And they tell the employer in front of us that there's 1,000 more where we come from. So all they need to do is just send us back. They keep our passport and they keep everything that has to do with us. The letters that is sent from the WSIB, we don't see it. We don't see it until you try to reach out to the WSIB if you find out about them, because most workers don't know about WSIB and they don't even have a phone to reach out to the WSIB because they come here with their home phone, so they can't call locally. And so it's kind of workers are trapped in every way when it comes onto the sub program. Yeah, thanks.
All right, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's 7:56. Maybe you got, want to read a question or no? Okay. You choose one. We're giving you the power to choose one question.
Let's see what the questions are. I think most of them were answered in the chat, actually.
Yeah?
Sorry,
Did somebody copy and paste this question?
I don't know. I took screenshots. Sorry, just scrolling down through your questions. If anybody wants to ask a question, maybe if you want to put up your hand and whoever puts up their hand first.
That was question. Yeah. Jerry Lee? You gotta come here. Nobody can hear you.
I'm not quite sure why Chris invited me out because I'm not a farm worker.
Not as anybody else here.
No. I'm ex-employee of the Toronto District School Board and ex-steward of QP 4400. And it is scary how much of what's gone on in this room is actually gone on in the workplace that I used to be part of. There's a very direct line between this work and the work that's not getting done. And these are people who are here. They're here in the country, and they are, I would say, willfully uninformed and treated basically not much better than an actual item. It's scary, but it's pervasive. The situations that you're dealing with are pervasive. Through my work experience, it's been there, and it's the only difference is that my address is local. So.
Thank you. So once again, the commonalities, how both racialized, how working class racialized communities are facing multiple barriers of access in healthcare in urban settings and rural settings.
And even when you actually try to make that leap, because I've met people who have been able to move from those situations into a professional environment, still run up against the very same situations that you're having. And I've had those things when I'm from this country. I'm fifth generation Canadian, and I still experience this stuff.
Thank you.
Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. And thanks for all your years as a host at CIUT Radio. Okay, CIUT Radio here. All right, so on that note, it is 7:59. We're actually going to end early. So thanks for everybody for coming out. Thanks to people from across the world who've joined today's amazing session. Thanks for all the workers, both in Canada and the Caribbean who've joined. Thanks for people in Colombia. Thanks for people in BC and Alberta. Thanks for the fantastic panel. So the next set of events that we have coming up, March.
Okay.
Yes.
We're not going to be ending early if you go on to do this again.
I have 30 seconds.
I just wanted to say that Radio Regent, the Phoenix, is also here.
I'm sorry. I don't know who just said that, but can you repeat it?
So my name's Anusani, and I just wanted to say that in addition to CIUT, Radio Regent is also here, and the Phoenix is also here.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for joining.
All right.
I'm going to put our link tree in the chat. So you can follow us at our social media handles, and I will also put our email so you can email us if you want us to let you know when our events are coming up, because we have a few more.
All right, awesome. And for any of my students who are still here, you'll get to the recording. Don't ask Ashley. I'll send you the recording, okay? Thanks to all the people who are budding lawyers who are here, amazing alumni, all the undergrads, all the workers, everybody who showed up for this. And we'll see you somehow and something in March, and then April, then May, and June. All right? Yeah?
Thanks, everyone.
All right, bye. Now you get to see me.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye,
Bye.
Chris.
Happy birthday, Alicia.
Happy
Happy
birthday,
birthday,
Lisa.
Alicia.
Happy
Thank you very
birthday.
much.
Thank you guys so much.
Bye, Chris. Bye,
See-
families.
Bad hair
Bye,
day,
everyone.
Chris.